All right, everybody, we're going to go over trimming. So for this particular project, the first trimming project we do on the wheels, we're going to be on the wheels for 2 days. The first day, you're going to throw both bowls. So you're going to have to get your stuff out and get cruising right away. I threw these just this morning, and then I kind of force dried them a little bit, and I'll show you how to I'll take you through that process because some of you are going to have to do that for this particular project as well. So I had 2 bowls. The goal here is going to be to throw bowls that are the same shape. So this one's kind of going to be angled, and then at the top it's going to round before it kind of crests. So what I have here is, okay, similar shape. This one probably has a little bit less of a curve there at the top, but I will address this bottom curve and make it a little bit more angled as I trim. So I'm going to work with my larger bowl today. Before I do, though, let me just take you through how to cut these off. So before you trim, you're going to throw both, bag them, because you will not be here for at least 2 full days pretty much before you come back. With it on the wheel, that's the easiest way to cut it. You're going to take this wire cutter, and I just wrap it around my fingers twice because it's too long. If I leave it long, I won't be able to reach the wheel. So I wrap it around my fingers twice. Put this straight down on the wheel, and I hold it down with my thumbs so that it stays flat, because if I let this go loopy, it's going to cut a loop right through my pot. Keep it down flat, pull straight towards you, and then lift. That's a cut. When you lift, you want to lift with the soft part of your hands at the outside instead of your fingertips. In the instance it would still be too soft to lift off, I would just grab a blow dryer here and blow dry it on high and as hot as I can get it on the blow dryer settings while it spins to kind of harden that surface up. Then once I do the outside, in order to trim it today, you may need to lift it. We're always going to trim without the bats on, and then you might need to turn it upside down and hit this part with the blow dryer, as the bottom is really the part you're going to be trimming anyways. I've already done that on my bigger bowl. So for now, I'm just going to set this one back aside, my little guy. When you're trimming, a few tools you're going to need. A loop tool. I prefer the one that is rounded on one side and squared off on the other. Then I always grab just a bigger tool. These come in all shapes and sizes, but I like that bigger work surface just for kind of neatening last minute. You're going to need some good soft clay. This is like super, super soft stuff. A pin tool in a pinch, and then your pots. When you're ready to get started, you're actually going to use these lines on the wheel to get your project centered. Now, it's a little tougher for you guys to see on the video, but you'll kind of see me go through this process. I'm going to set it down and check and see what I think is pretty centered, but you can obviously always tell when you start spinning. Now, there is just a titch of a wobble here. Easiest way to kind of address that, you can do this on the side with the pin tool and just slowly creep it forward until it makes a connection. You have to kind of let it make a rotation in the meantime just to see in there. So I'm touching, not touching, touching, not touching. So what I would do then is stop the wheel with that line I've just created facing me. Where the clay is touching the tool is where it's closest to you. So if I put a finger on either side, right there, and then I just kind of push it straight away from me, that should be centered. You can also cheat a little bit and do it on the bottom. I can hold my tool still. I'm looking for even gaps from the line to the outside edge. Now, provided that is perfect at the bottom, you know, there's some wiggle room there, but that's pretty close after I made that first adjustment. The next thing is we're actually going to have to attach this onto the wheel with the soft clay. Otherwise, when I take the tool to it, I'm just going to pull this sucker off. Do not forget to attach your project back onto the wheel upside down with some soft clay. If you do, when you start trimming, these bolts that are on the wheel are going to take big chunks out of your project, and it'll end up going round for round. Kind of around this tray, just like when you drop your sponge by accident, how it makes some rounds, except for your project, not so forgiving. So I'm just going to kind of roll this out into some coils, nothing too fancy. And then Where this goes, I'm going to put a hand on the bottom. I'm not pushing down too hard, but just so that it doesn't move. And then this coil just gets like formed around that bottom edge. And then I'm going to use a finger to push it, seal it back to the wheel. When I'm doing this, I'm not pushing my finger in to my clay. I'm just pushing it down next to it. So I'm going around my project. As you put pressure, that clay, because it's soft, it will form, oops, I made a fingernail mark I'll have to fix later. Kind of spin my wheel a little bit so I have access to the other side. You don't have to cover this completely, so long as majority of it's covered, more than half. So I would probably sneak this way and do one on this side. Notice I'm just pushing down next to it, not into it. If you push in and your clay is too soft, you'll actually change the shape. So here, and then push down next to. So that's enough. It's not completely covered. There are gaps, but it's most of the way covered. Okay, so that's important. Now we start trimming. So this is the actual trimming process. Before I start, I'm just going to get rid of that line with my finger, or you can hold a sponge to it lightly. The first part I'm going to address, I'm going to get rid of this little line here too. The first part of this I'm going to address is this outside edge here, right here at the edge. And when I hold up my pot that I've cut, you can see this little kind of lip there. That's what I'm going to get rid of. So I actually want the bottom of my pot right here to match the profile of my pot I'm going for. So for this particular pot, I want it to kind of be at an angle from this point. I want it to go in and down, so like at an angle, which is what you'll see me trim here on this bigger pot. When I do that, I start with my square side, and I like to hold it with a finger bracing it, and then I hold this sucker like I mean it, because then I have control with my wrist to move the tool. I'm gonna get my wheel going, kind of a good speed, just like I would wheel throw with, kind of a medium speed here. And then I'm gonna take the tool on the edge. Now you always see me hover kind of over the bottom. I'm not actually making contact, but I'm hovering there. Because if I do by chance catch my tool in my clay and it lifts it up, I don't want it to fly off and run rounds and end up ruined. And then I just kind of take it and remove some of that clay here on this bottom edge. Now, not only am I taking off the bottom edge, but you'll see me creep down on my pot a little bit because I want a nice uniformed pot, and that might mean for some of you trimming a little bit further down. Now you need to decide then too if you want that bottom rounded at this point. If you do want it rounded, then you're going to have to trim until that bottom edge is rounded. I want mine kind of at an angle straight, so I'm not going to do that. And I'll make sure I hold this up because I know it's tough for you to see this edge, the side of the profile here, as I trim. Okay, so I'm happy with that. I've been looking at it from the side. I don't know if you see me peek my head down here and check it out, but looking at the side of it, just making sure that the edge is a nice sturdy incline. And then the next thing I'm going to address is this bottom edge. So this bottom outside edge is actually going to maintain. It's going to stay there. That's going to become the bottom of my pot. So really quick, again, with that squared off tool, I'm just going to go flat on this outside edge, and I basically do it about the width of the tool, just going flat. So I'm not trying to carve in right now. I'm just trying to make a nice flat edge for this to rest on the table on. Because sometimes when you trim at the edge, the side here, some of that clay kind of mounds over depending on how hard your clay is. I know it's really hard to see, but I just basically held my tool there and went flat on that edge. Then I'm going to take just the corner of this tool, which I'm going to kind of hold it at the corner, and at the end of my mark, or at about 1/4 of an inch in from that outside edge, I'm going to make a line with the corner of my tool. So you can definitely see that part. Put that clay, just let it drip in your splash pan. And then from here, I'm going to take my tool, and from that line to the middle, I'm just going to drag my tool and let it make a swirl. Now, I'm not ever going to touch this outside edge again. This part's trimmed. That's done. I'm going to take the corner of my tool right in the line I've made, and I'm going to run that line right to the center. Now, don't press too hard. What I'm looking for with that swirl Okay, I know it's going to be at the bottom of your screen there, but what I'm looking for with that swirl is I want to check and make sure there aren't any holes. If there were a hole, then my bottom's too thin and I can't trim that deep. So I'm checking how deep I can trim right now. That swirl is a pretty safe space. So however far down my swirl is, if I trim until it's gone, I know I'm at a safe distance that I shouldn't poke any holes in the bottom. So what I'm going to do is with the flat side now again, clean that off. The flat side, I'm going to go flat in there until that swirl's gone. So again, I'm not going to touch this outside edge. I'm only trimming in the middle. And you can start from the outside or you can start in the middle. You can work your way back and forth. I personally like to start at the outside and kind of do it like a bullseye. So I'm going to trim out here until I stop seeing my swirl. Then I'm going to move in, just letting my tool do the work. You do not have to push very hard. The tool is sharp on purpose. Its job is to remove clay, remember, as a loop tool. So my swirls, at this point, I've been working my way towards the middle. It's gone on the outside edge, but not quite there in the middle. Ignore that little chunk that's stuck. I'll just flick that sucker off. I'm going to keep trimming here until my swirl is gone. Arguably, that very middle is kind of tough to get to. I just hold my tool there, let it hover. It wants to pull. You've got to hold it still. Any clay that comes off, if it gets stuck, you just kind of flick it with your finger. If it gets really stuck, then stop your wheel and use a pin tool to pick it off. Okay, so I've got this bottom. I've gotten rid of my swirl. I just put a new one in there by accident with my tool, so I'm just gonna kind of get rid of that. So now you can kind of see that deep swirl is gone. I just accidentally put that little swirl in there, so you're gonna have to ignore that little sucker. Now there is, like I said, when you trim, it kind of bunches the clay up sometimes. So now I'm gonna take this tool, and right in this corner here, I'm gonna go flat on the edge. I'm just kind of evening that up a little bit. And that, my friends, is trimming before I take this completely off of the wheel, because my tools leave a little bit of a different mark. I usually keep a wet sponge nearby and then just lightly sponge the bottom to get rid of any marks from my tools, because remember, I want this all to look uniform, and I used a sponge on the outside when I was throwing, so you're going to want to sponge down any part that you trimmed before you take it off the wheel, because why not make your life easier? So now, the last thing I'm going to do before I take this off will be to put my initials or whatever mark I'm going to use to mark my pot. But I'm going to pull you closer a little bit here, and you can actually see that that is a trimmed pot. And then, to take this off, you just kind of pull out a little edge here, and that should just remove nicely. Boom. So now, the side or the profile, I shouldn't show you the side, I stuck my fingernail in, is a nice, smooth, straight. So I took off that little lip that was down there. By trimming at the bottom, I've taken off a little bit of that weight. And then also it just made it look nicer. You can see my fingerprint marks in there, but that's okay. That is trimming, my friends. The next thing I would do is start on this little guy and make him look exactly or as close to this pot as I can. So the whole goal behind this project is that you're going to make 2 bowls. You want your bowls to be the same shape. They can be the same size or they can be different sizes, but they need to be the same shape. That's where they match. They match in shape, but not necessarily in size. And then the 2 bowls will be trimmed. So you have to trim both of these. So one class period you'll throw, and then your next class period you will trim. And that'll all be dictated if you're a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday thrower. So we'll just kind of start following that prescribed list this week. Have fun.